if you have more muscle mass, your body is burning more energy, keeping that
Hmm.
muscle mass alive. So even though you might be going and not doing cardio at the gym, you might be lifting weights and bench pressing, squats, whatever. If you are
Hmm.
building that muscle mass, you need to supply it with energy. So you are
Right.
burning more energy at all times, keeping it alive. So
That's exactly right.
therefore, yeah, and that's quite a logical way to put it, and that therefore you can eat. I mean, I'm not suggesting people eat crap, but you can maybe be a bit more flexible with your diet because you have the muscle mass in order to burn it. And I think, especially for me, I was quite lucky. I went to the gym really early, and I did start lifting weights. It's not a little bit like yourself. It's not so much the case now. I can't eat a pizza now and be fine. I think I go into like a go to sleep, but I could eat kind of more or less what I wanted when I was younger, and I was okay
Hmm.
because I was doing that. But then again,
Yeah.
I have friends that go to the gym. They're quite fit, but they do put on weight really easily, and they do. You probably are more sensitive to glucose. And would you say that?
Yeah, I would say that, and in addition to that, we might also mention because there'll be some in our audience today that just don't like doing resistance training or weight training
Mm.
or just, can't handle that. I would counter and basically say exercise is essentially any movement that you'll decide to do. If you're moving, that's great. If it's just a walk, if it's maybe some resistance bands, some of those, that's great because when you use your muscles, they're insulin sensitive, getting glucose out of the blood so you don't go through glycation. But importantly, there's also a non insulin related effect as well. Anytime you're moving muscles, contracting them with force in the gym or just walking, anytime you're moving, muscles will then also take up glucose out of the blood, not waiting for insulin in that case. So again, I've envisioned talking about the toll of glycation for a while and then some strategies to kind of help. I'll just jump to that now.
Mhm.
Exercise is any movement that you'll do. If you eat and sit on the couch, that's not going to be very good. So get up and walk, get up and do some jumping jacks, maybe lunges or squats. Anything that you can and will do is going to be a wonderful benefit to help stave off some of these problems.
And what other methods can people use? Do you think to stave off the problems? I mean, there's obviously diet's a big one, gym work's another one,
Mhm.
but is there any kind of sneaky secrets that you can share?
Yeah, so, let me mention a few of those. So, I get the question all the time, is glycation reversible? And I think it is to some degree, but the answer is nuanced, and honestly, that nuance is what makes this topic, I think, so important and I think clinically intriguing. Um, I will say, in fact, that parts of glycation damage are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to reverse. And what I'm talking about in this case are the chemical reactions that form AGEs, the advanced products, that then cross link or connect inappropriately to other proteins. That's like your collagens in your joints and in your skin. So those ones are very hard to remove, but there are lots of really good strategies that can help you intercept it along the way. And I've got a list of several of them that would work. For instance, some of them are receptor mediated. It gets into the weeds a little bit, but maybe we need to know a little bit more about glycation first to see how that works. Another one, like I say, is the movement exercise idea. That's awesome. We can talk more about that as we wrap up at the end. But one thing that is really helpful is this idea of time restricted eating or intermittent fasting. Let me mention that for just a moment. It deserves special attention. During extended periods of time without food, our blood glucose will first drop, and importantly, our insulin will also drop. So your body shifts into more of a catabolic state. And what happens here is this idea of autophagy starts to take center stage. I'm sure you've heard of that before. Many have heard of autophagy, which is our cellular kind of internal cellular cleanup mechanism. Auto means ourselves, and phagy is the same phage root that we use to describe phagocytosis, to eat things into the cell. So autophagy is basically eating your own proteins away. And it's not a random process. What your cells will do is they'll look for problematic, damaged, even glycated proteins and start to destroy them to recycle them. So if you periodically activate that cellular housekeeping program, even though you've glycated some tissues along the way, those will be the first ones that this body process will destroy. So that's very helpful. And maybe we'll talk more about that as well as we get a little further in.
Okay. Can you explain that again to me? I've kind of
Yeah, yeah. So there's this process called autophagy, and what that means is that when you go into a food restricted mode, your body basically turns on a switch that says, "Hey, there's no food coming. We need to really make sure we've cleaned our house because we need to be very energetically capable for the next period of time."
Yeah.
And so what autophagy does is, first off, it will turn off a signaling pathway called mTOR. It'll decrease that a little bit. It'll also make you more insulin sensitive, so you store all the glucose that you need and not have it circulating around, causing damage. And in the process, the lysosome is activated and it looks for problematic protein. If you see a lineup of collagen in a cell, that one's good, that one's good, that one's good. Oh, there's a lot of glycation on that one. This fine-tuned machine will go to that one and destroy it and then replace it eventually when needed with better non-glycated collagen in this example. So that's this nice internal process, and it usually becomes activated at about 18 hours, activated in essence at the strongest rate about 18 hours into a fast. Um, some of us like this intermittent fasting program of an 18-6 type model where you eat all of your food in a 6-hour window. Maybe you'll have lunch and then you'll have dinner 6 hours later, and then you don't eat again until the following lunch. Those are people that are activating autophagy regularly on a daily basis. I don't advocate jumping in and doing a 96-hour fast unless you're really excited about that. You'll have even more autophagy working there. Be mindful of your electrolytes and fluid balance and that kind of thing. But um, yeah, autophagy is a wonderful switch that'll clean out any problematic proteins, especially those that are glycated.
But is that cell turnover? Like, is
It is.
autophagy so that's aging essentially?
Yeah, well, it's at a cellular level, but it's also at a molecular level. So damaged organelles inside the cell can be targeted, damaged protein inside the cell, damaged protein that the cell's making and then secreting outside. All of those are targets, including cells themselves. So you will get some turnover. And that's why glycation has such a higher burden in the brain, because those neurons are post-mitotic. You're never going to make any more neurons. So any glycation damage you have accumulating over time is there to stay unless we can clean it up with some internal autophagy, but not the cells themselves. So it's a little bit different, or separated, if you will, from a cellular turnover basis to a molecular turnover basis.
What are your opinions on the? There's two questions actually that's just come to mind. So firstly is keto.
Hmm.
What do you think of the keto diet when it relates to exactly what we're talking about? You know, cell turnover, glucose, insulin spikes. I mean, would that be a
Hmm.
healthier diet to essentially do?
My personal opinion is there are many benefits of a keto or a low carb diet for sure. Again, even if you're on the most strict no sugar diet, you'll still have the basal level of glucose. You're still going to have an A1C level of 4, 4.5, somewhere in that ballpark. So you're not going to eradicate all glucose. But I think diets that prevent the spikes are those that are most advantageous, because the spikes is where the damage occurs, not where they are at baseline per se. So a keto diet is something that will generate ketones in the process. That's where the name comes from. Ketones are a byproduct of fat metabolism. So as you break down fat, they'll release small molecules, basically a double bonded O on a carbon molecule. Those are ketones. The data show us very clearly that ketones can be used as an additional fuel source. In fact, the brain works really well using ketones as a fuel source. It never completely runs away from glucose. Again, you're going to have some there, but ketones are very, very brain friendly. So yes, diets of that nature that prevent the spikes are going to be the ones that are going to guard against glycation damage, inflammation, and chronic disease the best.
It's interesting what you said there regarding the brain running off of ketones. I had a guy called Ali Houston on the pod. He actually came in twice because the episode, like, people loved him.
Mm.
And he was talking about the correlation between mental health issues and
Hmm.
changing your diet, essentially changing to a keto diet. And he was
Hmm.
measuring how people's brain reacted and how it manifested in some people. And he was describing this process. This is the simplistic. I'm not as smart as you know the him, but in the most simplistic terms, the brain was switching from running off glucose to ketones, And
Mhm.
there were people that described that process as literally curing their depression, curing their anxiety, curing X, Y, and Z, because the brain was running off essentially a different fuel source.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
I do wonder, because when I fast, or even if it's accidental, I feel light, I feel good, I feel quick. If I was to eat a bowl of pasta before this podcast, I'd be sitting here like this, and I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really, know what was going on. So it's really interesting that it has such a huge impact on everything. I mean, it's not just the cell turnover, and it's literally everything in the body it has an impact on.
Everything. Yeah, I love how you brought up the brain. Let's talk about it, and then I still wanna get to several other tissues. I don't want your audience to think that, well, glycation's just a blood problem, just my hemoglobin, I'll get over that, because that's not
Mhm.
true. It's going to be everywhere. So, let's talk about the brain. Brain is a fascinating topic in this area. So the brain is extraordinarily dependent on glucose. In fact, about 20% of our total glucose utilization happens in the brain. The brain will win tug of war between other organs and itself in terms of glucose acquisition. So it's going to get its energy. And even though it is extraordinarily dependent on glucose, paradoxically, the brain is exquisitely sensitive to glucose dysregulation. So the spikes the brain really struggles with. And part of that is, as I mentioned, neurons are not replaced, they're long living. So damage is cumulative and somewhat irreversible at the last stages. The brain has a lot of long-lived proteins. They're around for a long time. They don't turn over very regularly. Those are all glycation prone. And there's clear evidence now that a high glycemic diet will cause significant increases in ages. So people have looked at brain tissue and found these ages or glycation products that are starting to accumulate. Now, what's fantastic about the brain is that it has lots of different receptors that can detect changes, and one of those is the rage receptor. We haven't talked about that yet, not the emotion, but rage stands for the receptor for ages, and it's found expressed abundantly on microglial cells. Those are the ones that walk around the brain and clean things up. Astrocytes, those are the most numerous support cells, and neurons themselves. So when ages bind onto rage, it goes through a pathway in the cell causing neuroinflammation. So chronic ages in the brain are going to be a problem to cause inflammation. Microglial cells, I mentioned those. Those are more neuroprotective. They're the kind of resident macrophages in the brain. They become more neurotoxic. And this inflammation is really what's underpinning a lot of the ailments that you've talked about. Not only advanced dementias like Alzheimer's, but attention span, anxiety, those types of things. But remember, neuroinflammation is not a disease in and of itself. Neuroinflammation is glycation's downstream effect manifest in the brain. And that inflammation, or in this case, neuroinflammation, impacts us at every age. And that's really what the eyes are opening to that story more and more every day.
If you guys enjoyed that clip, please do me a huge favor before you go and head over to our Into the Mind podcast official page, where we have the raw, uncut Into the Mind podcast, and hit that subscribe button. And the more subscribers we get, the more incredible guests we can get on the show. I really appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you so much. And I'll see you all real soon.